What allowed ancient Egypt to aggregate the tribes that inhabited the Nile and in the desert in some cases to build this ancient empire might have also been a reason they didn't live that long. Massive cereal and grain production enabled the ancient Egyptians to raise cattle, a large amount of cattle, feed and train laborers, artisans, and scientists to develop this ancient superpower. Had it always been this way? No. But little did they know, highly industrialized cultures tend to suffer from cancers, vascular disease, even diabetes a lot more than non industrialized cultures. Now, I believe they suffered these diseases because of their advances in agriculture, okay, which they industrialized. From scientific data, we see that there may be a correlation between industrialized cultures and disease, especially cultures that were once hunter gatherers and then switched to a more sedentary agricultural lifestyle. Another factor affecting the health of agricultural societies is that when a food product, usually a grain or cereal, um, when this food product is increased, it becomes more accessible, a lot more than other food products they're used to from hunting and gathering. This makes for a smaller variety of food, which leads to nutritional deficiencies. Before this, there wasn't really a need to produce and store so much food. This change of producing and storing so much food was a incubator for infection. To substantiate my position, I would like to first look at a few mummies from the second Naqada period of pre-dynastic Egypt, which according to popular archaeology was close to 6,000 years ago. These mummies were found in a cemetery in Gebelin, which is south of Thebes. Each mummy was found at a different time in different burials. I'm using these as examples because I feel they best represent a pre-agricultural, pre-dynastic Egyptian type. Now, I do understand some agricultural practices were established, but not to the extent as we find in dynastic times. I also believe they are geographically and chronologically fitting to exhibit my theory of ancient industrial agriculture being the culprit of most paleopathologies in Egypt. In 1967, a series of x rays and photos of all mummified bodies in the British Museum's Egyptian Antiques collection provided a more detailed analysis for the mummies from the Gebelin excavation. The findings are summarized below. The first is of an adult male standing 5'3". This male adult body has all teeth present and healthy. There are fractures to the ribs, right pubic ring, thigh bones, shin, and calf bones, but there is no sign of or evidence of arthritis. The left index finger and several of the last toe bones are missing. The second is of an adult female standing 5 feet with fractures to the skull and many other bone fractures occurring after death. However, the bones are otherwise healthy. There is long brown hair present on the scalp. The third body under review is of an elderly person. Sex is unknown. This elderly body has decalcified bones, consistent with senile osteoporosis. The body was probably in a wicker basket and covered with an animal skin, as wicker and fur remnants are present and there are patches of linen on the body surface. All teeth are present, with caps worn. The body has many fractured ribs and only wrist bones of the left hand remain. The legs have been detached due to fractures mid-shaft of both thigh bones. There are lines of arrested growth in the tibia and last bones. Lastly, we have an adult male standing 5 feet. This adult male has remnants of bandages on the neck, pelvis, and right ankle. The skull has been detached, with some incisors missing, but the remaining teeth appear healthy. The body has fractures in the ribs and left femur. One arm has been dislocated at the elbow joint, and the left hand is detached at the wrist, and both feet are also detached from the rest of the body. Though there are signs of trauma pre and post mortem, there is little to no signs of disease found in these remains. Now, I'm not quite ready to accredit the health of these ancient people to living in a non-industrialized society. But what I do know is that science tells us later in ancient Egypt during the dynastic times, tuberculosis became an issue. It was very common, even amongst children. And the origin of this disease is in bovine cattle. Okay? There are no examples of this disease in pre-dynastic Egypt. You know, camels were domesticated to an extent, but not industrialized like dynastic Egypt. Another important note is that Egypt has a temperate climate, which means C3 plants would dominate the landscape. Examples of these plants would be emmer, barley, rye, and a few other grasses native to northern Egypt, and not the a more harsh environment of Nubia. The most prevalent plant family we find in Egypt is the Gramineae, which is a grass family. Some do C4, but not in Egypt, okay? There's 288 of these plants that found in Egypt, this plant family, okay? 44 are known to be food crops. Now that we know which plants are native to Egypt, the northern part closer to the delta, let's talk about the plants we found in the pre-dynastic tombs and sites. Okay. Ancient pre-dynastic sites of Nabta Playa, dated 8,000 years before present, Hidden Valley, 6,700 years before present, and East Pans near Abu Balaz, 6,200 years before present, all had paleobotanic remains of these plants: Panicum trigidium, sorghum, Setaria viridis, and Digitaria. This suggests to me that the early agriculturalists of the Nile Valley at this time would only be using the native plants of the land and had not yet began the intermarrying and selective breeding of plants from elsewhere that may have led to their agricultural evolution. We must keep in mind that these sites, these tombs where we found these grasses and plants, are all south of Thebes, which suggests to me that the agricultural science, the farmers of the pre-dynastic times were migrating north from the south, because we find plants that belong in the south in these pre-dynastic tombs. Now, two of these plants or grasses in particular makes me certain that the culture, the people, were moving from the south to the north. Okay, these two grasses, one known as Digitaria, south of Egypt, is known as fonio, okay, and sorghum. These two grasses are not native to Egypt, but they are native to the south. Now, when these pre-dynastic Nile Valley people over time continue to move north, they would have eventually had issues growing these crops from their homeland. So how this now early Nile Valley civilization worked this issue out might be also the cause or the reason they were able to aggregate all the other tribes of the Nile Valley so quickly. And this was probably due to a outside influence. And I think this influence was horticultural in its nature. I believe this because some of the oldest pre-dynastic evidence we have of foreigners coming into Egypt is of the Sumerians right before the unification of the two lands, which created the dynastic started the dynastic period. Okay, this makes sense paleobotanically because the area of Sumer, like northern Egypt, is also a temperate climatic zone. Evidence of this is in the paleobotanic remains of plants that are not native to northern or southern Egypt, but to the lands of the northern part of the Fertile Crescent. Okay, now we got newer crops better suited for the environment of the Nile Delta. Now thrived. They got some shit that's growing high yield. Okay, it thrived and allowed these ancient people to start mass producing cereals, okay, grains, which allowed for plant and animal husbandry. Okay, this allowed for more efficient agricultural systems and allowed these people to be more sedentary. Now, I'm not suggesting the sedentary lifestyle alone fucked the ancient Egyptians over, but I am suggesting that the increase of flesh and carbs and decrease of other food products, in addition to the more sedentary lifestyle and living too close to animals and now living too close to people, did affect the health of the ancient Egyptians. But at this point, we need to look at some remains of motherfuckers from the dynastic period. So at this point, if we fast forward 1,000 years into the dynastic period, let's start at the Middle Kingdom. We probably could start sooner than that, honestly, but let's give them, let's start at the Middle Kingdom, okay? All the way up to the Greco-Roman period, tuberculosis, arteriosclerosis, and heart conditions became a common occurrence. By the 26th dynasty, we have evidence of not only tuberculosis, but also ovarian tumors. The remains of a noble woman, I can't say her name good, Eratosthene, aged about 50 years old, from the necropolis of Thebes, okay? Almost back where we're starting from, and dated to about 6,000 BC, it's about 2,000 years ago. Her body was found in 1825. This was the first autopsy of a mummy ever performed. And this is when the ovarian tumor was found. Okay? At that point they thought the tumor killed her, but later in time, when our technology was better, it showed us she actually died from tuberculosis. Okay? And I understand many people will have an issue with me saying they industrialized their agriculture, but to raise as many cattle and as much grain as the ancient Egyptians did, it would have to be industrialized. Peace.